Yes, yes, it's safe to say at this point that we're all fully experiencing, or most of us are, experiencing the superhero genre MCU burnout right now. But all things considered, you know what? It was better than Thor Love and Thunder.
Oh my god, we're a team.
Higher.
Further.
Faster.
And today we have the Marvels. I'll keep this short because everybody, when it comes to the big blockbusters, those are the ones I get the least amount of views on in terms of like movie reviews, so everybody's already been talking about it, which is fine. So I'll just make my points brief and get through it real quick. All you gotta know is they're cranking them out. The movies, the TV shows, the series, all this, and you can technically watch all these things by themselves, but it's getting to a point now where literally to know any of these three main characters, Captain Marvel herself had her own first movie, so it helps to watch that. Miss Marvel had a Disney Plus series, which helps to establish her and her family, so it helps to watch that. Sergeant Rambo, is that it? Technically in the comics, I think she's Photon, but she was featured in the first Disney Plus Marvel series, WandaVision, and as a little girl in the first Captain Marvel, so it helps to watch that. Yes, you can watch this solo, but it's getting to a point where you really gotta be watching all these things and then somehow remembering them in the midst of everything. The Marvels is directed by Nia DaCosta. I didn't realize I covered her before. She did what I actually loved, the Candyman reboot, or remake? No, reboot, right? Reboot, remake? We have household name Brie Larson. You don't know who she is? How? We have my personal favorite, Iman Vellani, if I'm saying it right, who plays Miss Marvel. And then we have Teyonah Parris back as Captain Sergeant, Captain Rambo. Shout out to Zawe Ashton. Oh my god. They might not have developed your character incredibly well, but we love a bad baddie. That's why I'm just saying. I try to go in with just clear mind, open expectations. It's the best way to tackle these things. You can't let the hype or lack thereof get to you, because if you let the hype get to you, you're like, oh my god, yeah, this is better be great. And then if you just listen to the naysayers on the interwebs that are like, oh no, it's ass, terrible movie, then you're gonna be like, oh well, I'm not expecting much. So it's just hard to find the balance. I wasn't a fan of the marketing for this film, but then I kept hearing like mixed reviews. I kept hearing people say, don't bother, don't waste your time. And then I heard people say, oh, surprisingly good. So I had no idea what to think, which is good. I wanted to go with an open mind. I don't know if I was just sleep deprived, or maybe if my tastes evolve or change over time. Out of my whole group, surprisingly, I had fun. I kind of enjoyed this. It's no subversive masterpiece. It's not the next phase of the MCU. It's not one of the top 10 best Marvel standalone films, but I found myself chuckling, laughing, and having fun, oddly enough. Story's fine. Villain does something that affects these three that all have quotations around this because they're kind of vague in the details, but they all have light-based powers. So then whenever they use their powers, between Captain Marvel, Miss Marvel, and not Photon, they just kind of switch places based on who does what and when. And so that's the most creative part of the movie, I think, and what was probably the most fun or the hardest part to edit and choreograph. The story is fine, it services that narrative, and we're getting some character development for these characters, and we're slowly pushing the MCU overarching narrative forward, and then you throw in a mid-credit scene there, and then boom, there you go. I like some of the action. Not all the action, because some of it is just generic sci-fi. To be fair, a lot of this film is just generic and sci-fi. But there are some, I think the coolest action scenes for me were when they're swapping powers, and so you have both their move sets and their personalities that come through in their combat. And especially when they're fighting the main villain, which happens a few times, I don't know, it's not altogether too terribly violent, but it was fun enough, and people were taking hits and flying around and doing just some of the choreography was fun. It wasn't too terribly shaky for the most part. And like I said, she's my favorite. But Iman Vellani as Miss Marvel, this was in the show and it's in the movie. I think unironically she is adorable. I think she is very funny. I think she's the most endearing character out of the three of them, period. She's so genuine. She wants to help and her heart's in the right place and all this, and just her little one-liners and like what kind of end up being throwaway jokes and all this there, to me they were funny. And just the facial expressions and how excited she is and how much she wants to, like I said, how much she wants to help. It's just, she's adorable. She works really well in this film. And yes, representation wise, I mean, it's a thin line we draw, right? I love to see badass women in movies, or just in media in general, whether it's badass women, competent women. I mean, most recently, Saga Anderson and Alan Wake 2, cream of the crop in terms of just a competent FBI agent who is getting sucked into this, like, literal horror story. Or even someone like, I don't know, like Atomic Blonde with Charlize Theron, or Theron, however you say it, Charlize Theron. But what me and my friend group and fellow cinephiles worry about is that, are we doing it for the right reasons, or is Disney just trying to like market to the audience? Like, oh, our audience wants to see this and wants to see this equal representation, and like we're unironically here for it, but Disney's like, oh well, women and all this, you know, yeah, those they're pretty tough and capable, right? You know, give us your money to see them be tough. Like, it's like corporations that all change their profile pictures to rainbows for Pride Month. You know why they're doing it. You know why they're doing it. But the main cons for this film, I already mentioned superhero burnout. It's just poor timing overall because they're cranking them out. Luckily, with the SAG-AFTRA strikes, which I'm glad they ended, and that all the artists that are involved hopefully are able to get a better deal than what they had before. I'm glad that all happened. And furthermore, there's an article that came out, I don't know how legitimate it is, but the article basically said that Deadpool 3 is going to be the only MCU film to come out in 2024, which I think is great. Give us just one for the year, one summer blockbuster, give audiences a chance to catch up, to just simmer down. The pot's been boiling over for months and months and months now. We just need some space to breathe in and then out, and then 2025, I don't know, hopefully don't crank them out like crazy. Just give us a few, maybe a show here or there, but just take your time. It'll be all right. Admittedly, this film is kind of a generic sci-fi romp. We fly from random planet to galaxy here, aliens there, species here that you'll only know if you watch this show, another species reference there that you'll only really know if you watch this movie and that movie. But it's easy enough for a person who's never seen an MCU movie before in their life to follow. It's fine. It's just they hop around. Nothing really has any major weight to it or major consequences, and the heroes are gonna probably inevitably triumph. It's formulaic. It's just the MCU. We know what they do now. We've seen how they do most of their punches and what they pull and what they're gonna put out. So hopefully they kind of change the cards up. Every now and then a movie kind of shines above the rest and shakes things up, but as it stands, this is just another generic sci-fi MCU movie. So the last con that I put on here, and that I also touched on earlier, but I'll just say it real quick again, is I always try to judge films, especially if they're from a franchise, like, could it stand on its own 2 feet? Is it a good film by itself? And I think this one really, if you haven't seen the series and movies that kind of establish and start to build up these characters, then you're not really getting the full experience. Which is, kind of unfortunate, but at the same time, you know what you're signing up for, right? You don't watch the last Star Wars movie when you haven't seen any of the rest of them. Typically, if something's part of an overarching narrative, you watch them ideally chronologically, and it's like watching a long format TV series. Like, you can technically watch this movie if you have never seen an MCU movie before. You might have a decent time. Hell, it might blow your mind. Anyway, the Marvels. What was the critic consensus? 62%? I don't think that's very fair. I don't think it's like that bad or anything. I mean, as far as movies go, it's below average, and as far as Marvel movies go, it's below average, but it's still a decent watch. And I mean, I wouldn't say skip it. I would say if you're in the MCU and you're watching these movies and you want to follow along with the overarching MCU, then it's worth watching. Like, sure, get it, like, stream it, but wait to stream it. You don't need to see it in theaters. Low 3 out of 5. Low 3 out of 5 for the Marvels. Below average, but not complete poo-poo. So, take it for what you will. My brief thoughts on the Marvels. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie I review. And goodbye, travelers.